Jack Smith wants to testify publicly. He's been subpoenaed to appear before Jim Jordan's committee that's looking into the weaponization of DOJ. Irony has no bounds here. And President Trump says he wants Smith to testify publicly too. So how come he's having to testify in private? Why won't Jim Jordan, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, let Smith testify in public? Let everyone hear what he has to say, let them hear the questions. What is it that they're so afraid of about the public testimony? I think there is a good sense of what they're afraid of, but it might be a little subtle to figure out the clues. Let's break it down. But before we do that, let me remind you to hit that subscribe button. Make us the biggest and the best legal analysis and political analysis channel there is. So hit that button for us. Recently did a hit on this topic, and let you take a listen to it before we talk about it.
If Jack Smith was testifying publicly, what would you want to hear him answer in a setting?
I want to hear him answer all the reasons why it was a valid investigation, all the suspicions they had, all the evidence they had, and basically put on the whole case they never got to put on.
Because he wouldn't be bound by anything, right? I mean, could he just say essentially whatever he wanted to?
Sure. I mean, they try to cut him off if it began to sound kind of negative. But the other point is, nothing stops him from coming out afterwards, or even before, I guess, but coming out afterwards and talking about what he talked about, the questions that were asked, whatever he wants to say, because it's not like there's going to be a gag order on him.
By the way, if you want to see the full clips from my appearances on different media places like CNN, make sure you go to my YouTube channel, Under Color of Law. We collaborate with Legal AF. And we keep a full playlist of replays as well as original content, so do check it out. Now, what do I mean when I said that he should try his whole case? I really do mean that. He should just absolutely try his case when he's being put up to testify. Of course, he can't really do that. He won't have time to do that. There'll be questions and time limits on his answers. And the way these things work, those of you who saw the recording of my testimony before Congress, is that the representatives who are kind of like friendly ones, as well as the hostile ones, they're all more interested in getting their questions out than they really are from hearing too much from the witnesses. If you've testified before Congress, you know that for the friendly questions, like the ones I got from Jasmine Crockett, you want to keep your answers very short so she can get her questions out. And your answers are kind of just giving corroboration, verification to the questions that she's asking. On the other hand, when there are people trying to posture and twist what you have to say, you want to keep your answers long and fully explanatory, so it's much harder for them to twist them or use them all the time. That's the way congressional testimony is handled by seasoned witnesses, and Smith has a real ace in the hole on this. And that ace in the hole is volume 2 of his special counsel report, never before released. And Trump is afraid of it because while on the one hand, Trump says, take a listen.
I think Jack Smith is a sick man. There's something really wrong with him. I'd rather see him testify publicly because there's no way he can answer the questions.
Now, holding aside the question of Trump's appearance, raising the question of who actually looks more like a, quote, sick man, unquote, Trump's assertion that he wants Smith to publicly testify because Smith can't possibly answer the questions, that's very interesting. Maybe Trump thinks Smith needs a little bit of help. Well, it would be a big help to Jack Smith if Volume 2 was released. And Volume 2 is all about the classified documents case, all about the search warrants that were done at Mar-a-Lago. Release it publicly. Put it before Congress. Put it into the record. Let him testify. Read the whole thing into the record. Let the Republican MAGA congressman try to tear apart that special counsel report. They'd have to ask Smith questions about it, which will give him an opportunity to explain all the things they found, all the evidence supporting their charges against Trump. Now recall that the first volume pertains to the investigation that came from the efforts to overturn the 2020 election. It was submitted to Congress in mid-January. But the second volume, which covers Trump's handling of sensitive government documents, never made public because Merrick Garland, remember him, said in January that he would not release the second volume because there was a criminal case still pending involving 2 of Trump's co-defendants. He was afraid it might prejudice them. But after Trump started his second term, that case against those 2, Walt Nauta and the former Mar-a-Lago property manager, they were tossed out. So, aren't we all glad Garland was so cautious? Well, certainly, Volume 2 is not something Trump wants to see the light of day because he even filed a motion to intervene on the side of his 2 former co-defendants to make sure that Judge Eileen Cannon keeps that volume under wraps. Trump's DOJ states in court papers that it agrees. It agrees with those 2 co-defendants, appreciates the what they call extraordinary prejudice that they would suffer if Volume 2 is released. I ask, prejudice to what? They're not being prosecuted. What's going to happen to them? So, on the one hand, Trump sounds like he wants total transparency. He wants Jack Smith to testify in public, but at the same time, he's absolutely against the idea of Smith releasing the report now, or anyone releasing the report. It's really up to DOJ to release it. We can safely say that report is not going to get released while Trump is president, because it is up to the Attorney General. And that's why there are lawsuits being filed to try to force the release of it. And of course, the judge is Eileen Cannon, so, check and checkmate, right? You do have to wonder, what's Trump so worried about? He's not ever going to be prosecuted for the case, so damage to his reputation? Nah, it's probably just part of his tendency to want to fight everything, slow everything down, have it be a distraction, because he would prefer to feel like a big man, to have his own private DOJ doing what he wants to do. I mean, it is his private DOJ. His personal attorneys run the place. Nonetheless, they are fearful of that volume being released. And where there is fear, there's an opportunity, and of course, there's weakness. So what do I want to see Jack Smith do? I want to see him show up with boxes of Volume 2 of his report and offer to distribute them and read them into the record. The MAGA representatives will jump out of their skins and their seats, demanding he put them away, not even open them in public. And it'll be a great example of displaying their desire for secrecy. Smith can simply say, I believe this report would be a great help in answering your questions. And it would show the American public a great deal to see him do that. And he can come out of that private, behind closed doors testimony afterwards to speak about it. He can point to the boxes behind them and say, there's Volume 2. I offered it to them. They don't want to see it. They want to hide behind Judge Cannon refusing to release it. But it's right there. If the American people want to see it, they should demand that they get to see it. And it can answer questions. Maybe it'll be things that make me, Jack Smith, look bad. Maybe I did things wrong. That's why we have a report. Take a look at it. This kind of pressure from the public does change things when there is enough of it. Frankly, it changed things during the Vietnam era. Lyndon Johnson decided not to run again. And really, it did cause the end of the war as well. Same thing we saw in the Epstein files. It's the public pressure that changed the minds of the Republican House. They eventually had to vote to release it with only one opposing vote. Pressure matters. Showing the American people that civil servants like Jack Smith can apply pressure for the truth to come out matters. It will remind people of the integrity with which Smith and his team conducted themselves. But for Smith, it requires a change in behavior and attitude. This is no time for him to be taciturn. This is no time to protect the institution by not speaking out of turn. It's a time to speak the truth and to speak loudly, because there is no institution to protect right now. Justice no longer resides within the building at 950 Pennsylvania Avenue. Rather, it resides in the people now. All of you, all of us. Talk to you soon.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.
No president in history has been more friendly to drug dealers than Donald Trump. Only Donald Trump has pardoned high-level drug dealers, including the biggest drug trafficker ever convicted in the United States, the former president of Honduras. But at the same time, Donald Trump wants to kill the lowest-ranking people in drug trafficking anywhere in the world, men on small boats who might or might not be trafficking drugs from South America, thousands of miles from the United States. Donald Trump will kill them without a trial, and he will release giant drug dealers after they've been convicted in unanimous verdicts returned by American juries right here in the United States. The president of Honduras was convicted of drug charges in the United States and sentenced to 45 years in prison. That's how seriously the judge and the jury considered the charges against the former president of Honduras. And Donald Trump, not knowing one word about the evidence in that case, issued a full pardon to the former president of Honduras, the biggest drug dealer ever convicted in the United States. According to Washington Post analysis, Donald Trump has pardoned or granted clemency to at least 10 people for drug-related crimes since the beginning of his second term, and granted pardons or commutations to almost 90 others for drug-related crimes during the 4 years of his first term, the analysis showed. And Donald Trump's own Attorney General, Pam Bondi, told the Supreme Court last year that military service members are required not to follow illegal orders. The New York Times reports that in a friend of the court brief last year, Pam Bondi, then working as an attorney for a conservative think tank, wrote, military officers are trained not to carry out unlawful orders, and they know they may be held criminally liable if they did carry out such orders. The military would not carry out a patently unlawful order from the president to kill non-military targets. Indeed, service members are required not to do so. And today, Donald Trump's former defense attorney, Alina Habba, resigned as United States Attorney for New Jersey a week after the Third Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals upheld a ruling disqualifying her from holding that office. She's the second Trump-appointed U.S. attorney to be disqualified after Lindsay Halligan was removed from her position in the Eastern District of Virginia. And joining us now is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And Senator, we have Donald Trump, who wants to kill anyone moving in a small boat that might or might not have drugs in it thousands of miles away. But if you're the president of Honduras and you're sentenced to 45 years by a judge after conviction by a jury in this country, Donald Trump is the president and the only one in history who will let you go completely free for that.
Yep, 400 tons worth minimum of cocaine that this narco state leader was convicted of bringing into the United States as basically the guy who used his position as president to give cover to the drug dealers. And he got a pardon. And I just, I don't think we know the whole story yet. You get people like Roger Stone and Matt Gaetz involved in asking for pardons, and somewhere some money changed hands. So we'll find out, I guess, sooner or later, but it sure doesn't look good. The other thing that's interesting about this is that creepy guy in the Justice Department who told everybody that they needed to be ready to tell judges, F off, we're not going to follow your orders, and who Trump and his little team stuffed onto the Third Circuit Court of Appeals during the window while the contempt hearing against that guy was stayed by 2 Trump judges. That guy was on the prosecution of President Hernandez. So he can't really say that this was a bad Biden prosecution, that the fix was in some bad way against Hernandez. The guy that is his sort of chief thug in the early days of the MAGA DOJ, and who he loved so much, he put him on the Circuit Court of Appeals. Of course, not one Democrat would vote for this guy, but they shoved him through. That guy was on the case. So there's really no logic to it on the merits, which takes you back to, where did the money change hands? What was the deal behind the scenes that we're seeing thanks to, presidential immunity, and he gets to commit crimes for free?
Yeah, Emil Bove has the distinction of being one of Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyers after being one of the prosecutors who got that conviction against the former president of Honduras. And here's Pam Bondi last year as a private citizen telling the Supreme Court that a president who gives an order to kill unarmed people somewhere, non-combatants outside of war, that's clearly illegal, and no one in the military would follow an order like that ever.
Yeah, no cry of sedition against her for saying the exact same thing that Mark Kelly and others did. And it calls to mind the fact that they've just dug out that 2 of Trump's mortgages had the exact same statement that he planned to live in them as his principal residence, and he never did. and there were two, so they can't both be a principal residence. So, here are two examples of, well, if it's a Democrat doing it, then it's a really big deal. We're going to accuse them of sedition. We're going to talk about hanging them. We're going to put up fake prosecutions against them. But when it's me or my MAGA Attorney General, Pam Bondi, then you just whistle past it as if it weren't real. It's just bonkers. The thing that they forget is the judges read the newspapers. And the more this president and this attorney general and this Department of Justice look like the gangster gong show, the less cred they will have with courts. And that is not a good place for the Department of Justice to be.
Senator, as you know, Kash Patel has a new entry in the Gangster Gong Show. I'd like to get to that with you right after the commercial break that we want to squeeze in right here. We'll be right back with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Senator, let me begin with your former prosecutor's role here and what you see in this. This point, is it possible to commit a war crime if there isn't a war? What do we call it when there isn't a war?
I guess the common word would be murder.
Is that what you see here?
I don't know enough about the circumstances to, make a final legal determination. But for Pete's sake, you've got people whose boat has been blown up. Whatever they were doing has now ended in an explosion on the water, and you now have two survivors in the water. Even when you are at war, a decent nation goes and rescues the survivors and then treats them as prisoners of war, even in a war situation. In this case, to make a Hollywood reference, when the bad guys are machine gunning the survivors in the water, it's not Americans in the movies. It's the bad guys. And we are on the wrong side of this if we're blowing up survivors in the water rather than trying to send rescue.
Yeah, the people have been referring today to the World War II case, Heinz Wilhelm Eck, a German U-boat commander, who got the death penalty for this at the end of World War II because he did that. He was killing survivors in the water. It's apparently the textbook, literally the textbook example of the kind of illegal order to refuse.
Yeah, and I suspect, I haven't looked into this, but I suspect that that's actually part of the training that people get in the military, and particularly once you get up the chain of command to officer level and you get more scrutiny and you're responsible for more decisions, that it wouldn't surprise me if people in that chain of command had been taught the lesson of that Nazi U-boat commander's decision and the consequences that he paid.
And we have zero evidence that anyone at the Defense Department had any idea where any of these boats were actually going, some of them more than 1,500 miles away from the United States, well over 1,000. This one was well over 1,000 miles away from the United States. And they are suggesting that these tiny boats, smallest boats ever attacked by the American military in history, that these were somehow a threat to the United States.
Yeah, and if you put it into context with the conviction of Mr. Hernandez for taking bribes from and facilitating drug traffickers, the case of that he was convicted in was responsible for more than 500 tons of cocaine coming into the United States. I don't know how many of those little boats it would take to transit 500 tons, even if they were going to the U.S. And obviously nobody's in favor of drugs going to the U.S., but we have law enforcement to protect against that. And it certainly goes from bad to worse when you're doing the modern day equivalent of machine gunning the survivors in the water.
The other kind of inside reporting we're getting is from the Justice Department and the FBI about the chaos caused by Donald Trump's FBI director. Again, like the defense secretary, the most incompetent, unqualified FBI director in history. And the people inside there are telling us the story now in press accounts in the way we are also learning about Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, it's pretty stunning stuff over at the FBI right now. I mean, while the Department of Justice is trying to prosecute Jim Comey for lying to Congress as the director of the FBI, which is a whole separate screw up on their part, here they have this guy, Patel, the FBI director, who appears to be lying to Congress about his grand jury testimony, setting aside the fact that his grand jury testimony was given under immunity because he had asserted his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, which requires a good faith belief that he could be prosecuted for a crime. This is our current FBI director. That's who they're talking about. And now you pile onto this all of the ridiculous jet travel and then the vindictive punishment of the guy who ran the unit that's responsible for the jet because he didn't hide well enough where the jet's tail number had registered as Kash Patel flew his girlfriend around the country in the FBI jet. It's just one crazy thing after another. Perhaps the telling story in all of that was about Patel refusing to get off the FBI jet because he'd forgotten his FBI raid jacket. And he wanted to cosplay with Kristi Noem and all the rest of them who like playing dress up in these responsible positions. So somebody had to go and scramble and try to find a medium-sized FBI jacket so that he could come off the plane looking all FBI. And then it didn't have the right patches on it. So then they had to go do a second search for patches to put on his FBI jacket. And then finally he could come down off the FBI jet and, present himself to the FBI agents who were doing real work on real cases, trying to really protect America. And when you're doing that kind of work and you see that kind of clownish behavior out of your FBI director, it's hard not to be angry and very disappointed.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for starting off our discussions tonight.
As soon as Donald Trump signed the bill to release the Epstein files last night, the 30-day countdown began. So it would seem that as of tonight, the Department of Justice has now 29 days left to produce the files. Now, there are all kinds of ways the DOJ could try to hold back some of the material. There are also all kinds of questions about what could possibly be in them, like one that Senator Sheldon Whitehouse asked last month.
There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump left and right.
The question is, did the FBI find those photographs that have been discussed publicly by a witness who claimed Jeffrey Epstein showed them to him? You don't know anything about that. Okay.
Joining me now is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, a Democrat of Rhode Island. He's a senior member of the Judiciary Committee. And let me start on that question that you posed to Pam Bondi. If such a photo does exist, and we don't know that it does, I just want to be very clear. This is someone has said that they were shown this. But if it exists and were it to be in the Department of Justice's possession as part of these files, what is your level of confidence, 1 to 10, that in 29 days, the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi would show them?
I think it's pretty good. I mean, you got to remember that the Epstein files vote through the House was 427 to 1. In the Senate, it was unanimous consent. That's 527 to 1. This comes out of Congress with huge bipartisan pressure behind it. Does Pam Bondi really want to step in front of that and just cause immense trouble? These are documents that a lot of agents and other people have seen over time. So to try to make sure that you've completely touched every single person who would know about that photograph, convince them to lie about it, arranged a pardon for them, it gets very complicated when you try to pull something like that off. And the risks are very, very high of her messing around with this. I think that she would put herself in real peril of very bipartisan anger if she got caught pulling any stunt like that. But we will wait and see. You know, if the answer to that question was an easy one. No. And when she couldn't give the answer, no, to the question whether there was that photograph, whether the FBI had that photograph, whether she'd seen that photograph, you know, obviously that's something we'll now be looking for, because it would have been very easy for her to deny that at the time.
It's interesting to hear you express this confidence, because in talking to people the last 2 days, I think there's a sense of they're going to try to keep the cover-up going. They've been so desperate about it. But you put a lot on Pam Bondi. How much do you think Donald Trump is going to just be telling her what to do and him being, you know, briefed on all this stuff from her?
You know, she'll be trying hard, but you remember her statement that she had told FBI Director Patel to put 1,000 FBI agents looking through all the documents and seeing where Trump was mentioned or involved. You know, it's really hard to get 1,000 FBI agents to lie. Mm-hmm. And or even 50 FBI agents to lie, or even 5 FBI agents to lie, even if they're offered pardons. So the fact that this got so far and for so long through the FBI means it's no longer Bondi's call. There are tons of potential whistleblowers who could completely blow this up. And some of them, particularly after the way the FBI has been treated by this administration, with that, you know, complete incompetent Kash Patel, the jet setter, putting in as their FBI chief. You know, there may be people over there who are eager to find something gone wrong and whistle-blow it out. So those are all dangers that Bondi has to think about as she's dealing with the pressure from Trump to try to hide anything that is really bad for him.
The Department of Justice is just one of the many institutions that the Trump administration and Trump has tried to just bring under what his kind of his personalist purview, right? His plaything. Yep. He gets to say. This is true of almost everything, including down to the Kennedy Center, where he's taken like a somewhat strange, intense interest where he wants to kind of micromanage and program it. And he's got his buddy Richard Grenell there. It looks like it's been a complete disaster. I saw an article recently about the ticket sales, which had fallen off a cliff. Today, you wrote a letter to Richard Grenell with some concerns about the current arrangement there. What are you concerned about?
Well, it looks like more MAGA grift happening. The Trump people have come in and they're giving freebies out. We judge about $5 million worth of freebies to the FIFA. They're giving out contracts to friends and allies. A friend of Grenell was getting a $15,000 per month speechwriting contract. The failed Senate candidate Kari Lake's husband got given a $10,000 a month contract for social media services. There are huge bills for champagne and charcuterie. And I mean, it looks like they've just gone in there like they stole their dad's credit card and are loading up the goodies. And it's nothing compared to the 747 and the crypto grift and the Middle Eastern grift and the gilded bathroom and the gilded ballroom. But it just shows they can't even run the Kennedy Center without trying to put their hands into the public trough and loot the place for their own benefit.
Something very high resolution about a $10,000 a month contract to run the social media for the Kennedy Center to Kari Lake's husband. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much. We'll be right back.
Today, the Trump Attorney General, the Trump Deputy Attorney General, who is also Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer, the Trump FBI director, along with other Trump Justice Department officials, held a press conference about an accused drug dealer who was indicted last year, before Donald Trump was president, and who is now on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. But the first question was about the man who says he was Donald Trump's closest friend for 10 years, Jeffrey Epstein. Donald Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi, refused to say that she would release the Epstein files now that she has started a new investigation of Democrats who knew Jeffrey Epstein, all of whom this same Attorney General said were not involved in Jeffrey Epstein's crimes when she officially closed the investigation on July 7th of this year, saying there was absolutely no evidence that anyone else was involved. When she was asked today what has changed, she said this.
Information that has come for information. There's information that new information, additional information, and again, we will continue to follow the law, to investigate any leads.
And here is the only new information that has emerged.
As far as the Epstein files is, I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of my club many years ago because I thought he was a sick pervert. But I guess I turned out to be right.
That is new information from Donald Trump revealed yesterday. Donald Trump has previously said he knew nothing about what Jeffrey Epstein was up to. And now Donald Trump seems to be saying that before Jeffrey Epstein was ever charged with a crime, Donald Trump knew that Jeffrey Epstein, who said he was Donald Trump's closest friend, was a sick pervert. So the first witness in the Trump Justice Department's new investigation should be Donald Trump. And the first question should be, Mr. President, how did you know? Mr. President, how did you know that your closest friend was a sick pervert? Joining our discussion now is former federal prosecutor Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He is a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It seems that we do have some new information, and it's from Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's pretty stunning. I think you phrased the question well. The earlier way to look at that was, what did the president know and when did he know it? But, clearly, if you're the CEO of a billion-dollar corporation and a teenaged entry-level employee gets hired away by a friend of yours, the ordinary response by anybody normal would be a cake, a card, and it was nice having you work for us. And the fact that Trump went bonkers and expelled this guy Epstein from his club, that was already a huge signal that he knew that something really bad was going on, because otherwise his behavior was inexplicable. So now to have him actually confirm it and to say in his own language that back then he knew that this guy Epstein was a sick pervert, it opens up just a whole new can of worms about what he knew and when he knew it.
And you have his Attorney General today clearly refusing to answer in any way questions about, will you actually release the Epstein files? It was just blather that came out when that question came up.
Yeah, I mean, she's in a real mess. Remember, she came in saying that she was going to get to the bottom of the whole Epstein files thing. Then we discovered that billions of dollars had flowed through Epstein accounts, that suspicious activity reports had been sent to the Department of Justice, and not one had been investigated by her Department of Justice. We then went through the binders and all the shenanigans about the Epstein files investigation, the search for how many times Trump's name was in it. And finally, everybody's ready to clear the air. The House votes hugely, completely rolling Donald Trump so badly that he flips himself. And the Senate, by unanimous consent, put a new law out there in front of the Attorney General. And she can't say, I will enforce this new law. So I think we can look forward to more shenanigans out of the MAGA Bondi DOJ, but it's not going to go well, because this was a very clear statement by Congress and the American people, enough. And so when she goes back to more games to try to hide Trump's role in photographs and all of that, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse for her and for Trump.
So everyone out there knows that Donald Trump was granted immunity, criminal immunity by the United States Supreme Court. Everyone knows Donald Trump has pardon power. And so, more than ever before, there is a live suspicion out there that Donald Trump's people at the Justice Department can simply destroy any piece of the Epstein files that they might want to destroy, and whatever crime that might involve, they can absolutely leave their jobs with a pardon and never have to worry about it.
Yep, and that's exactly the kind of thing that Congress needs to be keeping an eye out for and investigating. It is very hard to interfere with as many records as the Department of Justice had. Remember, it took, what they say, 1,000 FBI agents trying to pour through them to figure out how many times Trump appeared in them. The thousands of times Trump did appear had to be identified. And so there's a pretty big record of people who know what was in there, and it's very hard to destroy evidence without leaving a trail behind. And with that many FBI agents and prosecutors and Department of Justice officials involved, they may very well try to do that. That would be very, MAGA. But I just don't think that they'll get away with it if they do that. They will have left a trail, and we will know that documents were interfered with and destroyed. So that ends up being a lot of pardoning. And every time one of these episodes happens, Trump's credibility with the public and with Republicans in Congress disappears. And at some point, that defeat turns into a rout.
Senator Whitehouse, please stay with us. We have to squeeze in a commercial break here. I want to consider next the indictment of James Comey, which now appears not to actually be an indictment after that shocking revelation in court today. We'll be right back with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse.
Here's the second thing, and this goes back to the ranking member's comments about yesterday. To me, yesterday was an awful day in the history of this committee. It set new low after new low after new low. And I'm not going to talk about all of the new lows. I'm going to talk about one in particular. And that is whether anybody noticed the irony that the day before the United States Department of Justice arraigned a former FBI director for allegedly making untruthful statements to this committee, the Attorney General of the United States sat right there and made untruthful statements to this committee. And they weren't maybe untruthful statements. This wasn't a question of nuance. She made allegations about the ranking member and me having received political contributions from some, she said, Epstein close confidant. Well, guess what? That's actually checkable. There's a thing called the Federal Election Commission. The Federal Election Commission keeps a website that tracks all of our contributions. An intern at the Department of Justice could have checked to see that the allegation, I'll leave it to myself, that I had received campaign contributions from this individual, that was false. And it's not a maybe answer. It's a yes or no. Did I or didn't I? And there's an unimpeachable record that shows that what she said sitting right there was not true. If we are going to care about untruthful statements made by the Department of Justice and the FBI in this committee, let's not have this be yet another area where there are different rules for one party than for the other party. And just by the way, on that very subject, the other thing that the Attorney General did sitting right there was to strip all cover away from the untruthful statements that had been made to this committee by the current FBI director. You all heard him here. He said that he couldn't tell us about his grand jury testimony in the Mar-a-Lago case, where he first pled the fifth, then got immunity, and then testified. He couldn't tell us what he testified to, he said, because the Department of Justice had sealed the testimony and because there was a court order barring him from doing that. He actually identified which judge, the chief judge of the D.C. Federal District Court. Well, guess what? We know that since then, the chief judge of the Federal District Court has said that that was not true. He said specifically nothing prevented Director Patel from discussing his grand jury testimony. And yesterday, the Attorney General had the chance to say, you're right. We did seal the testimony in that matter. The Department of Justice did seal the testimony, and Patel's statement was true. Not about the court order, but at least it was sealed by the Department of Justice. She didn't say that. So now both his testimony that the DOJ had sealed his testimony and his testimony there was a court order barring his testimony are kind of demonstrably false. False statements to this committee. And then, when he came back and we challenged him on those false statements, his second false statement was to say, I'm not going to answer any of those questions because my transcript of the grand jury testimony, I worked with the DOJ to see that it is publicly released. Well, it either has been publicly released or it hasn't. It's a very simple distinction, yes or no. And we all know that it has not, in fact, been publicly released. And when we asked about that from the Attorney General, again, she left him high and dry and refused to say that anything had been publicly released, that there was any publicly released transcript.
The last questions are much more difficult.
Yesterday stands in really stark contrast. I should say the day before yesterday stands in really stark contrast to yesterday. Yesterday, an FBI director was arraigned for making a false statement. The day before that, the Attorney General of the United States made arguably even falser statements. We'll see how the other case turns out. And she left the current FBI director completely exposed on his multiple false statements, and his grand jury testimony in the Mar-a-Lago case had been sealed by the department, was under court order not to be released, and had since been publicly released as a transcript. I don't know if this committee is going to take itself seriously enough to treat false statements to this committee as serious matters, irrespective of who made them. But the contrast is really stark. Thank you, Chairman.
Senator White House.
Boy, is my timing good. Director Patel, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
When you were here for your confirmation, we talked about your so-called enemies list. It appears to me that there have been adverse actions of various kinds taken against about 20 of the 60 people on your enemies list. You've been in office for 7 months. At that rate, you've got 14 months until you've hit all 60. Can you explain that?
Again, that is an entirely inaccurate presupposition. We do not have an enemies list. You can continue to characterize it as you wish. The only actions we take, generally speaking, for personnel at the FBI are ones based on merit and qualification and your ability to uphold your constitutional duty. You fall short, you don't work there anymore.
Well, there was a list. You don't like it to be called an enemies list, and it had about 60 names, and about 20 have had an adverse action. So those are, I think, pretty clear facts. Let me move on to your grand jury testimony, which we also talked about when you were here. I think you indicated that you understood that a witness in the grand jury is free to discuss afterwards whatever they told the grand jury. And you then went on to suggest saying, I can't go into court orders granted by the D.C. District Chief Judge, and you want me to violate court order. In those remarks, you very plainly suggested there was a court order of some kind that somehow restricted or limited your ability to discuss your own testimony to that grand jury. Since then, that chief judge that you mentioned, Judge Boasberg, has written, and I'm quoting here, Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E allows witnesses like Patel to divulge the contents of their testimony, meaning that nothing was preventing him from doing so before the committee. Can we confirm here today that there is no court order of any kind that limits your ability as a witness before the grand jury to discuss your own testimony to that grand jury?
To confirm that the action that that grand jury testimony has been released.
In what form?
Public.
Check out that. The FBI does background investigations. In the case of a U.S. attorney, Janine Pirro, it has come to light that in a civil proceeding, that Fox News executive, prior to her confirmation, called her, I'm quoting here, a reckless maniac who makes, quote, insane comments, and said, I don't trust her to be responsible, and noted her penchant for what they called random conspiracy theories on weird internet sites. My question to you is, did that turn up in her background investigation?
For any background investigations, we do not discuss those publicly. And for every background investigation, when there's an adjudication, it is not made by the career professionals who run inspection investigations.
Do you know if that information was found? You see, we're an oversight body, and there are really three possibilities here. One is that the FBI background investigation didn't find that stuff. That's worth noting, because these investigations, the background investigations, were supposed to find that stuff. That's possibility one. Possibility two is that the FBI did find that information, and they did not report it to the administration or to the committee. And the third is that you found it, you reported it to the administration, and they went ahead with her nomination, knowing that she had been described as a reckless maniac who made insane comments, who wasn't trusted by colleagues to be responsible, and who had a penchant for random conspiracy theories on weird internet sites. Are you saying that this committee does not have any authority or reason to look into which of those things is true?
This committee can look into anything it wishes. I'm telling you that the background investigations that are done by the HRD division are done by career individuals. They do not report the details of those to me. They adjudicate those independently and individually. That's how it's always been done.
What happened during the pause of FBI background investigations that was alleged in the complaint against you and the FBI by the FBI agents who were terminated? On February 12th, Emil Bovee directed the FBI, quote, to pause any FBI background investigations of Trump nominees until Patel was confirmed, which happened on February